We talk so much about video games, but it's important to remember that card games and board games are still wildly popular. Today's panel unites a group of
It's me
tabletop game
introducing us.
developers to give you a glimpse of the future of tabletop games. Check it out.
Hello, hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Play NYC 20 Day 3. We hope you've been enjoying our incredible lineup of speakers and talks and whatnot. I'm so excited to be here with everybody today for today's live panel. Even though we are in an increasingly digital world and Play NYC itself is virtual, tabletop games, card games, and board games are still such a huge part of gaming today, and in many ways, are growing and growing with folks around the world. And so, wanted to make sure that we spent some time with some awesome tabletop game designers and developers to talk about the future of tabletop games. So I'm going to go ahead and I will introduce each of you, and then why don't you just give us a rundown of who you are and where you're coming from and the kind of games that you've been working on. So we'll start off with you, Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rawlings. I'm the CCO of Chonky and Friends, the Chief Chonky Officer, and it's a tabletop card game that's coming out on Kickstarter next year, and I'm the game designer, artist, and I'm looking forward for it to be released so I can try it out.
Awesome, welcome. All right, next up, I have Victoria Cana. I think we're muted.
I was on mute, but okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Cana, and I'm the co-founder of Quartet Games, and I founded it with my partner and also with my sister. And we launched our first game called Gladius on Kickstarter earlier this year, and it raised about $100,000. And we really like making fun, fast, accessible games, usually with a historical theme or some other fun themes. Like we're working on a dim sum game in the near future. So that's me.
Ooh, yum. Nice.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. And finally, we have Núria. Núria, so glad you could be here with us.
Hi. Yeah. Well, I'm Núria Casellas. I'm the lead game designer and the editor at Cucafera Games. It's an indie publisher that we started a couple of years ago. And we try to publish games that are related to mythology and cultural traditions. And we launched Zoom in Barcelona board game last year. Well, we published it last year in Spiel, and now we're also continuing with a series of games that are to be played in the street that are called Passports, the Dragon Trail Passports, and that's us. I'm from Barcelona, so I am over here. Very late at night.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us so late tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, so great to have you all here with us tonight. So before we talk about the future, I'd love to get a little bit of a better sense and give our audience a little bit of a sense of where you've come from to get to where you are. Obviously, when folks think about gaming in 2020, they go right to video games primarily, but board games, card games, tabletop games are such a big part of gaming as well. And I think require a very specific background and passion and sort of person to be drawn to it. So Jonathan, let's start with you. How did you sort of get started with card game and board game design on your end?
Sure. So I actually started making apps, like video games, actually, on my phone, and but I didn't know how to program anything, so I had to hire programmers and everything like that. But I was just interested in game design, and I'm an animator and graphic designer, so I really wanted to not rely on somebody else to make the game, and so I could actually create everything myself. So I was going about my day one day, and I submitted a drawing on Reddit, and a publisher saw it, and he liked it so much that he said that I should make a game out of it. And I said, okay. And so I took about 6 months to develop a card game. And, I made a lot of revisions and stuff like that. It was pretty quick for making a card game, but I got it published, and I did a Kickstarter, got it funded. The game's called Lay Neckbeard. It's a little bit different than a game that I'm making right now, but I just got hooked on creating simple and fun games, and it's what I want to do as a career, to either publish my own games or have someone else publish them.
Love it. So went from digital to analog. Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Victoria, we know that you are one of the two folks behind Quartet Games. Why don't you give us a little bit of a background as to how you got started and how Quartet came together?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I think that for the both of us, we had always enjoyed playing board games as we grew up. Like they're the classic games like Candyland, Monopoly, card games, Mancala, stuff like that. And around the time that we were in college, we lived in New York City and we were looking for more things to do. And we started playing games like Catan, the two-player version specifically, Seven Wonders Duel, which is also like the two-player version of the Seven Wonders board game. And around that time, we were also interested in possibly becoming game designers. So we went to this event in New York City called Tribeca Games. It was the first year that they ever had that festival specifically to talk about games. And when we talked to one of the game designers there and asked him, how we could get into the games industry, he said, if you want to get in, you should start making a game out of just basic cards. And once you start there, you can expand. And so we started making a bunch of different prototypes. Some of them were bad, some of them were good. And the one that really turned out to be the best prototype out of all of them was Gladius. And so we decided that we would try to self-publish it and see it all the way through. So that way we could learn about the game development process.
Very cool. Very cool. And Núria, why don't you give us some background on yourself? And I'd love to see if your story is at all different from these fine folks, given that you're on the other side of the world.
Well, it's not really that different. I've also always liked games. I was a role player. I've always role played games, and I love video games. So I also started from the video game perspective. One day I started designing or trying to design a video game. And I realized that obviously I cannot do all the jobs that need to be done for a video game, like the same thing that Jonathan happened. So I decided to try it on paper. Like how could I do it if I did it on paper, right? And I did several tries of that game and some others, and I had one that we enjoyed a lot. And then there was a convention that I've never gone to a board game convention, and there's one in the UK called UK Games Expo, and there's a big area. There's a playtest area just to bring your game and just let people that walks around play it. So I thought, well, we're going to do that with our game. We're going to bring it there, and so I had an amazing experience there. I had the good luck of getting a publisher to stop by, and they tried the game and they published it. WizKids published the game in the US, and then it was like, oh my God, there's all this whole world to keep exploring, right? And it was a game about Vikings. I've always liked mythological themes, and it was a Viking themed game. And then I realized, why do I not try to also publish games that have mythology, but also based on mythology that it's not so known. Like, for example, the one that I have close by here in Catalonia, we have a lot of tradition with dragons and other animals. So that's how it happened.
Wow. Wow. And a lot of, in everybody's story to some extent, there are sort of that digital games experience too, or the attempt at least into the digital realm. For folks that have done that, what have you seen as being sort of the challenge of designing, building out, and distributing a tabletop game versus your work or your start on work in digital games and video games?
Who wants to go first?
Any of you, go for it.
Well, so I haven't released a whole bunch of video games. I'm actually just starting out in video games separate from this. But with distributing video games, you can upload it online on itch or on Steam, or even if you launch a Kickstarter and people back it, the distribution is easy. It's like, here's the game, it's live now. And, sometimes you could even update it, make patch changes to it. But with a tabletop game, if you plan on launching it on Kickstarter, if you plan on self-publishing it, or if you plan on bringing it to retail on your own, you have to make the product as final as it can be in order to market it to the audience. And I think that the game section on Kickstarter is actually the most profitable, and like that's where they get the most number of backers. And in order to get those backers, it means that there is more competition in that scene. And then in addition to making a really awesome game, making sure that you're marketing it really well, there's the distribution aspect, which is a lot more difficult. Like right now with Gladius, we had the successful Kickstarter, but that isn't the end. We had to hire an editor for the rule book. We had to do all the layouts for the game. We're getting a sample copy soon. We have to do quality assurance testing, and then we have to manufacture those games over in China and then bring them from China all across the world to bring them to backers. So that's the main difference, I would say, with tabletop games, is that it's a physical product and you have to go get it to people.
I would just add that on top of, in the Kickstarter area, yes, you get them to backers, but if you want to get them to shops, then that's a whole avenue area that it's also pretty difficult to work, because you need to find a distributor that gets them to the shops in each different country. Your board game needs to be prepared for as many languages as you want to distribute with. So I think it's very complex.
There's backer kit is a good way of getting your backers to use their instead of paying for shipping on the Kickstarter, you can collect those fees outside of Kickstarter without paying the fee. So it's like an easier way to get all of your shipping done there. But yeah, I agree with Victoria and Núria about what they were saying. And it's a whole different ballgame of being able to release a video game and a tabletop game. It's easy to test the game online through a tabletop simulator and Tabletopia, but the distribution and manufacturing is like way different, and probably more of a hassle. I would think, maybe.
Yeah,
I would say for small publishers, it's definitely more of a hassle. If you're looking at large, everybody, a lot of video game companies produce also their games physically. But I'm saying for let's say smaller indie publishers, the distribution area is a lot more complex to figure out.
Yeah, and it sounds like even outside of a pandemic happening, developing, distributing, play testing, and actually getting tabletop games into the hands of players is already such a challenge. Tell us a little bit about your experience since the pandemic has actually changed the world as we know it, and what we're all doing. How has that impacted your work specifically around the games that you're either currently working on or the ones that you're working to distribute that you've already completed?
Sure. I've been doing Chonky and Friends for about a year and a few months, and it's been difficult to test it when I first started out because the pandemic was just starting, so I didn't really know what I could do. I would just have to play with my fiance, and there's only so many times I could do that before she gets bored with it. So I need to find other people who do this for they're also game developers, so I can test their games and they can test my games. So I had to learn Tabletop Simulator, which took like a few weeks to do. And then after that, I tried to find a bunch of Discord channels that I could join that have people who also play, have their games on there as well, so that we can, trade testing our games so that we can better our games. So that's mainly what I've been doing right now, is trying to, develop my game to be the best it can be and get as many different thoughts on it from different people.
Nice. How about you, Victoria?
Yeah, so So I'm based in Seattle, and we actually have a board game design club called the Seattle Tabletop Game Designers. And usually every Wednesday we will meet and we'll play test other people's games. Some people will actually just go, even if they're not actually play testing a game at that particular moment, just because they want to hang out with people and get feedback and stuff like that. Around March, we had to cancel those and we moved those online to a combination of Discord and using stuff like Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator to play test our games. But we've been doing a lot of thinking within our club about what the future of tabletop games will look like. It really depends a lot on how long the pandemic goes on, how long people will be inside. But the trends that we've definitely been seeing and that we're interested in potentially making games for are there definitely is a higher demand for two-player games in case you don't live with a larger family. There is a demand for games that you can play remotely, whether that means it's digitally or you can play it through webcam because it's some sort of party game or like a game that you can use just like visual stuff or like have a GM or something like that. And yeah, so those are a couple of the things that we've seen. We've also seen that co-op games seem to be popular as well, especially because people are desperate for social interaction as we are all trapped inside.
Right. How about you, Núria?
Yeah, well, in our case, so basically we were working on launching a campaign on a crowdfunding site here in Spain for these games that I told you that were about the Dragon Trail Passport, but because you play them on the street, you couldn't play them. So basically that campaign got delayed and we just launched it like at the beginning of the month. So that was one of the things that happened, that it was a strange situation. So we waited to get a better time for it. And the other thing we did is that we wanted to put the game on an online platform, but we never got around to it. So we published, as I said, Zoom in Barcelona last year in October. And so we took the opportunity to put it on Tabletopia, right? So to explore how to use the platform and do that. And when we had it there, we just took some time to do demos to a lot of people, like to offer ourselves to just help people get acquainted to the platform itself and to our game as something, to help people see that there were these platforms available where you could go play online at the beginning. And we also organized the championship. We felt like we could try. So we decided to try to organize the championship. We had 24 people. We were running 6 simultaneous tables with a referee in each of them. And we had 2 rounds. And it was quite a fun experience to do. And I think it's good to try to see what you can achieve. I know it's not a board game in the sense of played on a table, but it was still the feel that we were trying to play around a table somehow with people that were not there. And it worked. It was quite fun. So in that sense, we tried to explore how to port our game to Tabletopia and how to use and see how people would react to championships online and these kind of things. So it was a different experience.
Wow. And, Tabletopia has come up a few times already just in the past few minutes. For folks that are out there that are looking to either, start making their way in, building out tabletop games or are trying to figure out how to adapt to this sort of new world, Núria, why don't you give us a sort of just a rundown on what Tabletopia is and if there's anything like it outside of Tabletopia that folks might be able to use in the current situation?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's several platforms. I think the most well-known would be Tabletopia, Tabletop Simulator, and Board Game Arena. No, more or less. There's more, but I think that those are the 3. Tabletop, so they're all different with each other, although they're all online. Tabletopia is basically a library of board games where you just need to subscribe to that, so you are able to then play the games with whoever is also subscribed. There's There's a lot of games offer a free version, and then you can play them for free. And then there's a premium version, and then you need to get a membership in order to play the games or the versions of the games that are on premium. So that basically is what Tabletopia is. Tabletop Simulator, if you can correct me, all of you, if I'm wrong, but Tabletop Simulator is basically, it's a software. So you buy a program, you have to download it and install it in your computer. And then you can play with everybody who's got also Tabletop Simulator, and in there you can it has a workshop, and you can create your own games, as many as you want, and share them with people so you can play test them. You can find games that are already uploaded there and play them online. So it's a sort of a different kind of approach. It also has DLCs you can buy from games that have been made on purpose for Tabletop Simulator. And Board Game Arena is a bit different from the other two because it's basically it has code, so it's coded. The actions that you can take are controlled, which the other two, they're basically, you feel like you have to pick a pawn with some hand that flies around a table. And in Board Game Arena is more of you can click on something and it moves to the right place, right? It works from different. But there's also a lot of games available there, and you can also play online. I think that's
Gotcha.
it. Is there? You can add anything to it if you want.
Yeah. Anything else that folks have found helpful, Jonathan, Victoria?
Yeah. Actually, if you on Tabletop Simulator, if you have Steam, you can actually play with someone else without having Tabletop Simulator. You can invite them through Steam, but yeah, it's kind of weird sometimes. But you might, if you have like hidden information and stuff, it might be a problem. So I'm not sure how well it would work if that's the case.
Yeah, well, I think Tabletopia doesn't have the ability to have hidden information unless it's in your hand, and that I think it reduces the amount of games that you can play there due to that feature. I haven't really tried it, so it might be, but I know that Tabletop Simulator has a good fog of war kind of approach, and it works a lot better for hidden information games.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I've noticed that they have better tools for you to upload your game. It's maybe a higher learning curve to learn Tabletop Simulator, but I think it's worth it in the end to learn it. But obviously, Tabletopia, I mean, if you just get a link from somebody, you can put it into your browser and play it. But the interface and everything like that I don't think is as intuitive as it is on Tabletop Simulator.
No, probably not. But I think that for designers, for playtesting, Tabletop Simulator offers a lot more possibilities, while for publishers that want to play with their direct clients or direct users, I think that Tabletopia is more user-friendly in that sense. I think that kind of makes a difference for me.
So, when I asked the question before, Victoria, about how everyone's adapting to the new normal we're all living in, you had mentioned something really interesting, and that was that you'd seen sort of an uptick in requests for like the 2-player version. And obviously for folks like me who are not, building out tabletop games or, actively involved in the development of them, we don't even think about that kind of thing. That in this current scenario, we are all sort of relegated to even playing board games, card games, just general tabletop games with whomever we are stuck with, for better or worse. How do you see, moving to the future, how do you see, tabletop games, specifically board games and card games, since there are all different kinds of sort of analog games you can go into, fitting into this new world that we're living in moving forward?
So when the pandemic initially hit around March and April, I know that there were a bunch of different people who had planned to run Kickstarter campaigns for their board games. They all paused their Kickstarter campaigns because the world needed to figure out what was going on before they could go and launch their games. And then shortly after that, I think around May, people started launching their Kickstarter campaigns. And what we saw was that many of those Kickstarter campaigns actually did really, really well. And the summertime, like June, July, August, these are not really known to be popular times of year when people are buying board games. Part of that has to do with it's the summertime, people are on vacation. Also, usually this is like a very big convention season where people go to Origins in Ohio or Gen Con in Indianapolis or the UK Games Expo. There's just like a lot of conventions at this time. But what we found is that people are still backing games on Kickstarter, and we're seeing a lot more indie games getting a lot more backers and raising a lot more money than you would typically forecast for them. So I want to look into it more because I wonder if people are playing more board games now, or if people are really just online and they're online more and they want to do something and they want to play board games. And so when you back a game on Kickstarter, you don't get it for like a year or so. And so they're hoping that in the future they'll be able to play those games. But I think that the people definitely still want to play board games based off of the many online board game conventions that I've been to.
Good. I think that's a win for all of us then in the end.
Yeah.
Nice. Jonathan, how about you? Look into the crystal ball and tell us what you think, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. Obviously there's a lot of stuff up in the air, but where do board games and card games, general tabletop games fit into sort of this new landscape?
I think hopefully once the pandemic is over, more people will definitely be going in person to conventions and things like that. I think things will return to normal of people wanting to play in person. Cause like if you're playing a game of deception online or something like that, and you can't really see someone's face or they have like a tell on their face or something like that, you kind of want to look at somebody's face and see if they're bluffing you or something like that. So I think that in-person gaming and tabletop games in person will definitely come back. But I still think a good amount of people right now have made a good solid base on Discord and online to test games and things like that. And I think that will stay for a long time and probably grow to be even bigger than it is now. But it's going to be a combination probably of just people getting back to doing everything. But there's also now a larger amount of people, because I've heard from people who have tested my game and I've tested their games where they've been like, it was dead before, like nobody would test anybody's games before March or anything like that. There'd be like 1 or 2 people. And then all of a sudden now everybody's online testing games. And I mean, it's a wonderful thing that people can do this, but, and I hope it stays that people can do it online because it's so easy and accessible and you can get things done a lot faster that way instead of wait for a convention. But I still think that both possibilities are there and, people should embrace both of them.
Great. And Núria, obviously you're coming at us from a totally different part of the world. What do you think the future looks like, and how might it be different from between Europe and the US from your perspective?
I think it actually looks pretty similar because the situation was the same here. There's a big group of designers that meets every Wednesday here in Barcelona, and that obviously had to stop, but it moved online, the Discord channel, and they're using Tabletop Simulator, etc. All the same things. But as I agree with Jonathan, that even if we go back to playtesting in person, a lot of the people that couldn't attend those meetings, that they were not in Barcelona, that were around or all over Spain, basically, and they couldn't find a place to meet or an easy place to meet, that really gave them the opportunity to be now meeting nearly regularly every week, which is something that they didn't have before. So I also hope that we're going to keep some of that, so we all feel more connected in that sense without losing obviously the in-person. So for the designers, I think that it's exactly the same. For the people, I think that a lot of people have thanks to the pandemic, has discovered board games as a form of entertainment at home for a group of people that, we had to find something to do indoors, and suddenly we took the dust out of some of the old board games that we had, and we asked online if somebody could recommend some new ones, and suddenly the whole thing exploded because there's so many more that there used to be, right? And I think that that's gonna keep continuing, and I hope that these people also find joy in going into clubs or board game shops and conventions, and then also grow into the, you know, into all these people that already regularly goes. That obviously, whenever we can, I think that it will be very nice to go back again and see all the people in person. It is you know, it's part of the joy of playing the board game, is being around the table with some people. Although, as I said, I think that the fact that we can explore some different approaches to board games, like some that add some digital view, or that can be played, but also with somebody who's not there, and some things like that. I think that that's really, really interesting, and that it's worth exploring.
Yeah. And you know, I think I have a big question for all of you as the last question here. Obviously, we are in an increasingly virtual world, and everybody is watching via Twitch right now. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that are watching right now that are, you know, only playing video games or only playing digital games. Jonathan, let's start with you. This is your chance for folks that are like in front of their screens all day long, just playing video games. What makes board games so special in 2020? Why should they not just be playing video games?
Because, I mean, interacting with a person through, you know, there's some sort of special interaction when you can play face-to-face with somebody and interacting with them, even if it's right now online. There's a lot of communities that are supporting a lot of these, you know, playtesting groups. And so I think that if you get into board games, you'll learn about video game. You'll appreciate board games and video games even more if you just because the game design in board games is something that you can look at. And you know, a lot of board games have adopted their designs through video games as well. And there's some games like Slay the Spire and Dicey Dungeons. And I love playing those games because they're basically like deck builders online. But whenever this is over, I think that people will be able to appreciate both of them. And, you know, just, you know, if you like game design and you like, you know, playing video games, you'll definitely enjoy playing board games as well, I think.
Yeah. Núria, let's go to you next. I know you touched a little bit on this in your last answer. Why should folks be playing more board games right now?
More board games. Well, I love video games. So I have to admit that I really, really like them. I like both because they provide me with different kinds of experiences. I think that, like, a board game, I really like dungeon crawlers, and, you know, things like, it's like playing Diablo, but on a table, right? Because the experience is less scripted. So basically, a cooperative game on a table with a bunch of people around me, I never know how it's going to end. We're all going to do crazy things. While if we play in a video game, we perhaps have the decisions a little bit more restricted. It's a matter of how well we can do them, but perhaps not so much what we can do, right? So I would recommend to try games of any kind, but there's so much. I really like cooperative games, so I would recommend those. And there's some that have a bridge between the physical and the digital. So maybe that's something that, you know, you can explore. Like, I don't know if I can say a favorite game, but it's like, for example, it's a very famous one. So it's like Mansions of Madness Second Edition. So basically, it's a Cthulhu themed game where there's also an app that comes with it that sets up the structure of the game. So there's a semi-scripted kind of adventure, which is quite an interesting thing.
I love that. You know, you talked a little bit there about how there are games that are digital, that are essentially digital board games, and people don't even know that they're playing a board game, quote unquote, or a card game, but it's just digitized. So I love that idea of, you know, folks using that as sort of their gateway into a live, in-person board game or card game at the point at which we could actually be doing that again if they aren't doing that with the people that they're quarantined with or wherever they are right now. Victoria, no pressure, but you have the last word. Why should folks, what is so special about tabletop games right now in 2020 that people should be diving in and getting away from their screens to play them?
Yes, so I agree with what everyone else said. I'll try to say different things. So right now is supposedly a golden age of board games. There are just more board games, more different kinds, all sorts of innovations, new themes, new mechanics that you have not like that the world has never seen before. I don't know if like my camera is working or not, but like for example, I have this game, like this is a macaroon game called Macarioshka, which is from Japan, and it's like this is a giant macaroon with smaller
Yeah, we can see
macaroons inside. Oh, you can see it? Okay.
Yeah, we can
and
see
this is an abstract game where what you're trying to do is you're trying to eat up all of these other macaroons. And like this is crazy. I don't think this is like a game that you would have seen before. This is like a toy.
Wow.
But there are just like all sorts of new things on the scene, and I think that people like typically have this idea of what board games are like, and some people may not expect to find the types of games that they would like to play. But I think that there is an increasing variety, and it's so exciting to be a part of it and to support the indie games that are becoming more widely available. And then in addition to that, this is silly, but like they're good for your eyes. I'm working from home. I work remotely. And so I realize that I stare at my screen longer because I don't go out to eat lunch. Like I don't have meetings in person. And so I go to the eye doctor and he's like, why are your eyes red and stuff like that? And it's like, because I'm staring at a screen even longer. But when you get to play board games, you get to play games, but your eyes won't hurt as much. And it's more tactile and you get to hold cool stuff. So it's good for you as well in that sense.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end off on too. So you heard it here first, everybody. We are in a golden age of board games and card games. There are so many different ways for you to play test and try board games and card games through things like Tabletopia and other different places. And I think in an age where we are all craving a little bit more in-person connection, why don't you start practicing now for the time when we can all be together in person again and play board games and card games live. Well, Jonathan, Victoria, Núria, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Play NYC, we will be back in just a very short break. Talk to you in a little bit. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.